Welcome to a deep dive. Today we're looking at a really fascinating clash of ideas. It's all about how the universe got started, how worlds and stars actually form. We're putting ancient esoteric cosmology head to head with 19th century science. Our source material is based on a text exploring H.P. Blavatsky's big work, The Secret Doctrine. It looks at her arguments against the science of her time.
Right. And our goal here is to unpack Blavatsky's challenge to that science. We want to explore the alternative she offered and maybe, just maybe, find some surprising ideas hidden in there. It's really about understanding different perspectives, how knowledge changes, or as Blavatsky might say, how it cycles.
Yeah, cycles. So for you listening, we're digging into these really foundational ideas about cosmic birth. It's like comparing two different blueprints for the universe, right? One from the science lab, the other from, well, ancient wisdom traditions. Why should you care? Because it really pushes us to question what we think science knows for sure and what value might be hiding in older ways of thinking. Okay, so let's start with this key argument Blavatsky makes. She takes that 19th century idea of this diffuse primordial world stuff.
The basis for the nebular hypothesis, yeah.
Exactly. And she says, hang on a second, this isn't actually new.
That's right. She makes a strong case that this concept has really deep historical roots.
Okay, so give us some examples. Who is she pointing to?
Well, she brings up people like Anaximenes,
Yeah.
way back in ancient Ionia. He talked about stars forming from condensing pregenetic matter,
Pregenetic matter, interesting term.
isn't it? To jump forward, you got Tycho Brahe seeing the Milky Way as this ethereal substance. He thought the new star in 1572 came from that. Kepler had similar ideas about a star in 1606 and even about the ring around the moon during an eclipse.
So not just ancient Greeks, but astronomers closer to her own time, too.
Definitely. Even Halley, the comet guy back in 1714, he recognized what he called self-luminous matter.
Okay, so science was observing this stuff, starting to theorize. But Blavatsky's essentially saying we knew this already, or something like it.
Pretty much. In Theosophy, it connects directly to concepts like mula prakriti, that's root substance or akasha, but in its undifferentiated state.
The universal matrix.
Or the waters of space, yeah. That's the idea.
And crucially, this stuff wasn't just physical matter in her view, was it?
No, absolutely not. That's key. She describes it as fundamentally spiritual at its root. It's the ultimate vehicle of divine thought.
Wow. So matter itself is just the carrier for something deeper.
Exactly. So by tracing this history, she's not just saying we thought of it first. She's subtly undermining the perceived originality and maybe the authority of those 19th century theories.
Like Laplace's nebular hypothesis.
Right. Framing them as, maybe incomplete echoes or partial rediscoveries of something much older and, in her view, more complete.
More complete because the esoteric view accepts the nebula idea.
Yes, it accepts evolution from a diffuse state,
Yeah.
sure. But the big divergence is on how it happens and who or maybe what is involved.
Right, this is where it gets really different. She says it's not just mechanical forces.
Not at all. It's intelligently guided by hierarchies of conscious beings.
The Dhyan Chohans, the builders.
Those are the terms, yes.
Huh.
And they're acting under immutable law, not just randomly making things up.
So the occult perspective doesn't deny the science observes nebula or that they condense.
No, it acknowledges the observations.
But it criticizes the science for being incomplete, for having this materialistic bias that leaves out the intelligence, the spiritual side.
That's the core of it. And it suggests this broader pattern, maybe, that knowledge itself is cyclical. Truths known ages ago get lost.
Then science rediscovers bits and pieces.
But often, in a purely material form, stripped of that original spiritual context.
Okay, so she sets the stage by questioning if the primordial stuff idea was even new. Now let's dig into her specific problems with the big scientific model of her day, Laplace's nebular theory.
Right, Laplace's model. It was pretty ingenious, mechanically speaking. You have this hot, spinning gas cloud.
It cools, gravity makes it shrink,
So it spins faster, right? Conservation of angular momentum,
and then centrifugal force throws off rings of material.
which then condense down into planets. It sounds neat, logical.
But Blavatsky saw holes in it. Big ones. What were the astronomical facts she pointed to that just didn't fit this neat picture?
Well, she highlighted quite a few things that, from her perspective, showed the limits of a purely mechanistic view, things that science at the time was struggling with.
Okay, give us the rundown. What were the main challenges?
First up, retrograde motions. This is a big headache.
Things spinning the wrong way.
Exactly. If everything came from one spinning nebula, you'd expect it all to spin and orbit in more or less the same direction. But some moons, Like around Neptune and Uranus, they orbit backward.
Which the theory couldn't easily explain.
Not without jumping through hoops, no. But Theosophy, with its idea of multiple forces and, intelligent guidance, could allow for that kind of complexity.
Okay, what else?
Then there were the anomalous planetary densities.
Densities didn't match the theory.
Right. You might expect a simple pattern, maybe denser planets closer in, less dense further out, or something smooth. But it's not like that.
Like Venus being less dense than Earth, even though it's closer.
Exactly. Or Uranus being denser than Saturn, despite being further out. And the sources mention Jupiter's moons being way denser than Jupiter itself, like a factor of 0.288 denser. How does that happen if they just formed from Jupiter's outer stuff?
Good point. Doesn't fit the simple ring model.
Not easily. Also, the sheer variations in axes, orbits, and sizes. The planets are just so different. Their sizes, the tilt of their spin axes, the inclination of their orbits.
It's not uniform at all.
No. And if it all came mechanically from one simple process, why such diversity? The esoteric view suggests, well, more complex origins, individual paths for each planet, guided by different intelligences.
Okay, retrograde motion, densities, variations. What else?
Comets and meteors. The nebular theory just didn't have a good story for them. Where did they come from? Why do they behave so weirdly?
Weirdly, how?
Well, Blavatsky loved pointing out how comets seem to almost defy gravity, especially their tails.
Ah, the tail's pointing away from the sun.
Exactly. Even when the comet is moving away from the sun, that strongly suggests some kind of repulsive force, not just gravity. Theosophy links this to Fohat cosmic energy.
Fohat again. Okay, one more.
The solar enigma. This is fascinating. The sun spins pretty fast, and it's not very dense overall. So basic physics suggests it should bulge out at the equator like a spinning pizza dough.
Yeah, centrifugal force.
But it doesn't. It's remarkably spherical. Astronomers knew this was a problem, a real puzzle for the fluid models of the sun. Blavatsky emphasized that science didn't have a good answer.
So she's taking these things astronomers themselves were observing and puzzling over and using them as evidence.
Precisely. Not just minor glitches, but signs that the whole purely mechanical system was missing something fundamental.
The persistence of these anomalies became, for her, arguments for needing these other forces, these other principles, the ones her esoteric system provided.
Yes. The perceived failures or gaps in 19th century science created the space for spiritual or esoteric explanations to seem necessary.
Okay, so if the scientific picture was incomplete, what was Blavatsky's alternative? Let's get into the esoteric view of how the cosmos actually forms.
Right. It offers a radically different take on things like the sun, how planets originate, and the fundamental forces involved.
Let's start with the sun. In her view, it's not just a giant nuclear furnace, is it?
Oh, far from it. The sun we see is considered just a reflection, a kind of material shell.
A shell for what?
For the real sun, a hidden spiritual reality within or behind it.
A spiritual core.
Essentially, yes. The sources use terms like Kamarupa or Buddhi desire vehicle or spiritual vehicle for the physical sun. It reflects the true invisible spiritual sun, which is Atma or universal spirit.
So the visible sun is like a window.
That's the analogy used. A window cut into the real solar palace, letting us glimpse the interior work.
What about things astronomers saw on the sun, those weird willow leaf structures Nasmyth described?
Theosophy interprets those as reservoirs of solar vital energy. They're specifically linked to Fohat, seen as the vital electricity that powers the whole system.
So the real source of energy isn't fusion in this model, it's this hidden spiritual sun.
That's the idea. It's the true storehouse of vital energy, prana, or jiva, the one life. And importantly, it's seen as self-generating, always in balance.
Ever receiving as much as it gives out.
Exactly. Unlike a physical fire that consumes fuel.
That's a profound difference. What about the analogy of the sun as the system's heart?
Yes, it's called the heart of the solar world. Its brain, maybe representing the highest guiding intelligences, the Dhyan Chohans, is hidden behind the visible sun.
So the whole solar system is like a body.
A vast living organism, yes. Sensation is radiated into every nerve center. The waves of the life essence flow into each artery and vein. The planets are its limbs and pulses. That's the imagery.
Wow. Okay, and does this connect to things like the sunspot cycle? The 11-year pattern?
Occultism explicitly links it. It's attributed to the rhythmic contraction of this solar heart, like a heartbeat, as the universal life fluid moves through it.
So the sun's main job isn't just light and heat, but emanating this life principle.
Exactly. Emanating jiva or prana, the soul stuff, that vitalizes everything. It's the universal life giver.
This completely reframes the sun. It becomes this dynamic, living, spiritual entity, not just a lump of hot gas.
It really does. And it obviously requires thinking about subtler realities, different kinds of energy than just physical. Life becomes a fundamental cosmic force, not just an accident on planets.
The whole system as a living being. Okay, so that's the sun. What about the planets? Laplace said they were bits thrown off the sun. What's the esoteric story?
Blavatsky uses that interesting phrase again. She says the sun and planets are only co-uterine brothers.
Co-uterine brothers. Shared womb.
Right, meaning they had the same ultimate nebular origin that primordial Prakriti, or differentiated Akasha.
But not formed in the way science proposed.
Only in a different mode, she says. It implies something more complex than just physical detachment from the sun, maybe a parallel development, interdependent.
So not parent-child, but siblings emerging from the same source material.
That's the implication. Each planet, in this view, is also its own complex system, a septenary chain of globes evolving somewhat independently, though harmoniously, within the whole.
The source mentioned in Anaxagoras here, connecting his ideas.
Yes, his idea that primordial matter was put into motion and ordered by the mind, nous, is seen as resonant.
And the mind in Theosophy is?
Mahat, the universal mind, which operates through those guiding intelligences, the Dhyan Chohans.
Back to intelligent guidance again? It seems central.
Absolutely fundamental. The specific nature, the makeup, the evolutionary path of every single body, sun, planets, moons, is shaped by these consciousnesses, working under karmic law. It's not just blind mechanics.
So this co-uterine idea really shifts the relationship. Planets aren't just children of the sun.
They're its brethren. Their diverse characteristics arise less from being physically born from the sun and more from their own unique evolutionary journeys within that shared, intelligently activated matrix, guided by specific intelligences for each planetary chain.
Which allows for all that variation we talked about earlier.
Precisely.
And these guiding intelligences, the builders, Dhyan Chohans, they are absolutely essential to this whole picture, aren't they?
Non-negotiable. They're called mechanicians, builders, divas, various names. They aren't some external guide pulling strings.
Immanent principles.
Yes, immanent conscious principles and hierarchies that actually implement the laws of nature. They are the architects who fashion the cosmos out of chaos.
According to the plan in the divine mind.
Exactly, according to the blueprint in Mahat.
And the primordial stuff itself, the mula prakriti, is ultimately spiritual.
In its deepest essence, yes. It has an intellectual and divine nature. It's the soul and spirit of the cosmos. Physical matter, even the most ethereal kind, is just the vehicle.
So trying to explain where the universe came from without these intelligent powers, that's where Blavatsky sees the failure, the Frankenstein's monster theory.
That's her perspective, yes. Without them, you can't explain the real origin, the purpose, the ultimate destiny. These intelligences bridge that gap between the undifferentiated stuff and the incredibly complex, ordered universe.
If the universe isn't just random chance,
then its order, its precision, its laws must come from an intelligent source. That source implements the plan through forces like Fohat. Natural law isn't just a property of matter.
it's impressed on matter or administered by these intelligences.
Exactly, which gives the whole process a profound sense of purpose. Evolution isn't just stumbling around. It's directed towards unfolding this divine idea.
Let's shift focus slightly to another big challenge Blavatsky raised. The mystery of rotation. Why does everything spin?
Right, this was a huge puzzle for 19th century science, and they often admitted it. How do you explain the origin of all this spinning and orbiting just from basic physical laws?
The source points out that scientists themselves said it was hard to explain physically.
Yes, she quotes them saying things like, "It is impossible to explain the physical origin of the rotatory motion of the solar system using only known forces."
Yeah.
That admission was key for her.
And she felt some of the scientific explanations were kind of circular.
Definitely. Like saying rotation comes from centrifugal force, but then saying centrifugal force comes from, well, the force of rotation.
Doesn't really explain the start of it all.
No. To her, that kind of reasoning showed just how inadequate purely materialistic models were when it came to fundamental causes.
And there wasn't even agreement among scientists. Lots of competing ideas.
Oh, yeah. The source mentions collision theories, ideas about currents in the nebula, solar explosions, rings breaking up mechanically, plus wildly different guesses about the age of everything.
A nebula of conflicting ideas, you could say.
Yes. And Blavatsky would argue that this scientific confusion reflected a deeper problem with the whole materialistic approach itself.
Which is where the occult view comes in again.
Right. The esoteric doctrine insists that the incredibly precise, stable, harmonious movements we see in the cosmos simply cannot be the result of line matter bumping around.
It's too ordered.
Far too ordered and stable over vast timescales. It demands an underlying intelligence, a guiding hand.
So a purely material system, unguided, just couldn't spontaneously create and maintain this kind of complex, lawful motion.
Theosophy says no, it's incapable of it. Instead, you need the movers, the intelligences, the Dhyan Chohans, again, to provide the initial impulse. And not just the initial push, but to continuously guide these motions according to cosmic law.
And she even used Isaac Newton to back this up.
She did. She pointed out that Newton himself, despite formulating the laws of gravity, admitted he couldn't explain the original impulse given to all the planets and stars using just known natural laws.
He saw a limit to purely physical explanation.
Yes, he acknowledged a difference between the natural forces he described and the intelligences that set the immutable laws into order and action. Coming from Newton, Blavatsky saw that as hugely significant.
But for her, this appeal to intelligence wasn't just filling a gap in science, was it?
No, it wasn't just a God of the gaps. It was rooted in that core philosophical principle, analogy. As above, so below, or as in the small, so in the great.
Like a watch needs a watchmaker.
Essentially. If complex human machines require intelligence, how much more so the vastly more complex and precise cosmic machine? The sheer stability and predictability of orbits, for instance, were seen as direct evidence of these intelligences at work.
And the laws themselves, gravity, motion, aren't just inherent properties of matter in this view.
They're seen as expressions of the cosmic mind, Fohat, or they are actively administered by the intelligences. Law becomes an active, intelligent principle, not just a passive description.
Okay, let's loop back to those anomalies we discussed, retrograde moons, density variations, but think about them specifically as challenges to simple gravity or mechanical laws.
Blavatsky called them freaks of motion or constitution. These things that didn't fit the neat mechanical box.
Like those retrograde moons spinning the wrong way.
Or the planets having densities that don't match simple condensation models.
Or the sun refusing to bulge like it should.
They all seem to challenge simplistic explanations based only on gravity and centrifugal force as understood then. They hint that something else is going on.
And comets were her star witness here, weren't they?
Absolutely. Her long-haired, sidereal radicals.
Because they seem to thumb their noses at gravity.
She loved that idea.
Yeah.
They appear to be very poor respecters of the majesty of that law, and to beard it quite impudently.
Especially the tail pointing away from the sun.
Yes, that was the clincher for her. It strongly suggested the tail was being pushed away, repelled by some force, probably electrical, she speculated, which is an aspect of Fohat.
So if its tail defies gravity,
then the comet itself can't just be obeying gravity in a simple way. Her quote is emphatic. It can hardly be credited with obeying that law straightforwardly.
So these freaks aren't just minor scientific puzzles waiting for a better equation. In her framework, they're actual proof.
Proof that there are more forces, more principles, maybe more intelligences at play than 19th century materialistic science was willing or able to admit.
They create the need for concepts like vital energies from the sun.
Like Fohat acting as both attraction and repulsion.
And the continuous influence of these guiding movers.
Exactly. If comets defy gravity, if planets have weird patterns, it suggests the cosmos is more dynamic, more complex, maybe more fundamentally alive, governed by principles beyond pure mechanics. Intelligent principles, vital principles, spiritual principles. They hint at a need for a richer, multidimensional physics and metaphysics.
So we've really journeyed through this fascinating confrontation, haven't we? The 19th century scientific drive for mechanical explanations versus Blavatsky's claim that ancient wisdom already knew, but included that crucial element: intelligence, spiritual forces.
Yeah, we've seen how she really leveraged the acknowledged gaps and puzzles in the science of her time. Those retrograde moons, the planetary densities, the sun's rotation, the comets. She used them all as evidence that a purely materialistic explanation just wasn't enough.
And we explored her alternative. This cosmos born from a spiritual, primordial stuff, a sun that's like a living heart, planets as co-uterine brethren, and the whole show guided by intelligent hierarchies, the mechanicians using forces like Fohat.
It paints a picture where cosmic order and movement aren't just random chance playing out according to blind laws. They're expressions of a deep cosmic intelligence. The laws themselves are actively administered, part of a living, purposeful universe.
It definitely gives you a different lens to look through, challenges a lot of modern assumptions, just like it challenged the assumptions back then.
It really does make you think.
So here's something for you listening to mull over until our next deep dive. Blavatsky's core argument was that science was basically rediscovering ancient truths, but kind of gutting them, stripping away the spiritual and intelligent core. Now, think about the huge cosmic mysteries we still face today. Things like dark matter, dark energy, why the universe seems so finely tuned for life, even the origin of life itself. Could there be valuable insights, maybe different ways of framing the questions hidden in some of these ancient or esoteric perspectives that modern science is still missing or overlooking? Or are these just two fundamentally different, irreconcilable ways to view reality? Something to ponder.